Tonight, no more delays. WA prepares for takeoff. Our state finally set to rejoin the country and the world when our hard border falls at midnight.
Red alert, our hospitals under fortress-like restrictions. Their walls go up as the border comes down.
Flood devastation taking a tragic toll. More lives lost, towns swamped and Sydney suburbs on alert.
Ukraine under siege, Kiev targeted with deadly missile strikes as a massive military convoy closes in.
The PM positive, Scott Morrison in isolation, infected with COVID.
And back to business. The Queen returns to work for the first time since her COVID diagnosis.
Live from Perth, 7 News with Susanna Carr and Rick Arden.
Good evening. It's happening. Fortress WA is coming down in 6 hours as our big state reconnects with not just the nation, the entire globe.
From 12:01 a.m, overseas travel will finally take off again, with flights departing and arriving at Perth Airport.
It's been 696 days since our border first closed to keep COVID out, forcing families apart.
Right now, the first international flight is already on its way from Dubai. The aircraft is due to touch down just before midnight, and vaccinated tourists won't have to quarantine.
But as WA gets ready to welcome the world, the peak of Omicron is also on its way, bringing new restrictions with it. Ben Downey begins our coverage.
Terminal 1, international arrivals, a smoking ceremony for staff and a welcome to country. Before they welcome the rest of the country. The red carpet officially rolled out on the eve of opening up to other states and the world.
We're ready, excited, looking forward to welcoming those people through that door.
In anticipation of more than 2,000 international passengers across tomorrow and Friday, finishing touches were added to shop fittings at the terminal after lying dormant ever since this announcement was made.
In effect, we'll be turning Western Australia into an island within an island, our own country.
And I will not forget that day. That was the start of it. No, I did not believe that we would be going through 2 years, but anyway, I'm pleased to be at the light at the end of the tunnel.
One flight is already in the air heading to Perth from Dubai. Emirates flight EK420. On board, 56 passengers who will be the first unrestricted international arrivals in 2 years when they touch down at 11:20 tonight. Shortly, 52 passengers aboard a Singapore Airlines flight and almost 270 passengers on the first Qantas flight from Sydney will depart to arrive 5 minutes after midnight. All up, there'll be 21 interstate flights arriving tomorrow, among them 6 from Melbourne, 5 each from Sydney and Brisbane. On board one of those will be bride-to-be Tara Burgess's father.
Right up until when they announced that they'll open up on Thursday, I wasn't going to have my dad to walk me down the aisle.
Rings were ready, but one irreplaceable thing was missing.
It's something you think about when you first decide to get married, like your dad walking you down the aisle.
Until the reopening date was set in stone.
And then we rang my dad, and then my dad's like screaming for his wife, like, we've got to book tickets, we can go. Yeah, so everyone was really excited. Yeah!
Excitement that's spreading overseas. No more borders giving West Australians the confidence to travel abroad.
I'm so excited. I'm leaving to go and see my mum in Africa. It's been a long journey. Thank you, Mark McGann, for keeping us safe. I'm going to do the triple vax boogie, mate.
The era of border closures is nearly behind us, but some features from the past 2 years will remain. Police will continue to have an increased presence at international arrivals, processing any unvaccinated passengers who manage to arrive in Perth before they're processed into hotel quarantine. Because with borders being lifted, case numbers are rising too. A further 1,766 local cases were recorded today. Totals as high as 10,000 cases seen in other states now look inevitable.
The chances of you becoming infected with Omicron will get higher each and every day. If it has been 3 months since your second dose, please go and book your third dose in now.
Flights to Perth, like the virus, taking off. There's just a little over 5 hours now until that first flight from Dubai. Emirates flight EK420 arrives with 56 passengers on board, who importantly won't have to quarantine. The first of 4,800 expected tomorrow. 1,000 of those are expected to come internationally. A further 2,000, the Tourism Council says, will actually be coming from interstate. West Australians who've coincided the end of their holidays with the March 3 reopening date. Now, the most popular route by far is between Perth and Melbourne. It's actually at 90% of the levels of trade we saw pre-pandemic, and things are only going to get busier. The Easter holidays and school holidays are on the horizon, and bookings there are filling up fast. All that being said, it's still going to be some time before trade reaches the levels for airlines and airports that we saw in 2019. Sue?
Ben, thank you. Family and friends will be allowed into the state tomorrow, but not inside our hospitals. The Chief Health Officer has banned visitors as the system moves to red alert. The change comes despite the fact there are only 16 people in hospital with COVID, none of them in intensive care. Jordan Cutts explains.
Tracy Sullivan needs surgery to have her gallbladder removed. The Mandurah grandmother says she's been trying since April last year.
It was cancelled originally because of COVID. The second operation, I got halfway through and then my blood pressure spiked, so they had to cancel. I'm rescheduled to actually attend Fiona Stanley for the operation. I'm still waiting for an actual appointment to see a surgeon in regards to a date for this.
The appointment was meant to be on Friday, but it's been pushed back a month.
I actually burst into tears because it just seems like it's never ending. I'm never ever going to get there. I'm never going to feel well again.
WA hospitals being moved onto red alert doesn't help Tracy's cause. Non-urgent elective surgeries being culled.
How do they justify it? We need to keep going. Elective surgery is essential surgery, so we need to keep rolling with this.
The reduced number of Category 2 and Category 3 elective surgeries doesn't start till 14 March.
Tomorrow, it's the hospital's turn for fortress-like restrictions. Their walls go up as the borders come down.
Once again, the government's panicked and gone with red, in my opinion, too early.
There are only 16 people in hospital with COVID. Roughly half are there because of another illness. None are in ICU.
There is a lag in hospitalisations, and so we expect the hospitalisation rate will grow over coming weeks, and that's why our hospitals need to be prepared.
Another significant change is a ban on all visitors to public hospitals unless essential. That means one birth partner, a designated carer for a newborn, children or people with a disability who can be there 24/7. 2 guardians, including that 24/7 designated carer during visiting hours, 1 emergency department buddy, 2 visitors in an emergency situation, and compassionate visitors for a dying patient, decided by doctors on a case-by-case basis. There are some exemptions, but it depends on the situation. If you make it in the door, expect a rapid test. Essential visitors, carers, parents and guardians will need to have a RAT each visit to a high-risk setting, such as transplant, haematology, oncology, renal dialysis wards. There is only one more colour after red, and that's black. By definition, it means the system is at capacity. The decision to push that button sits with the Chief Health Officer. We requested to speak to Dr. Robertson. Instead, the Health Department sent the rules, 14 pages of visitor guidelines. Information whiplash for people just wanting to know if they can visit their loved ones. Jordan Cutts, 7 News.
The East Coast flood crisis is closing in on Sydney tonight, with extreme weather bearing down on the city and some outer suburbs on alert to evacuate. The disaster has claimed another 3 lives, taking the New South Wales death toll to 5.
Ballina on the New South Wales north coast, the latest community in the flood firing line.
I've been here 32 years and it's never happened. Devastating.
SES crews and the Defence Force were kept busy moving people to safety underneath the town's famous Big Prawn. Residents here were warned it was on the way. The hospital was evacuated last night. In Lismore, far less time to prepare. Residents and visitors sharing stories of frantic escapes as water rushed in.
We pretty much had to cut ourselves out of the house with a knife through the basically through the roof of the kitchen.
It's just rained, and by 1 in the morning we got text messages to evacuate.
These friends relieved to be reunited.
I was so worried about this.
I saw it on Facebook, you said you're leaving obvious with stuff.
People started returning to their homes as the floodwater started to recede. It's revealed a grim toll. The body of a second woman in her 80s was discovered in her home. A man was found dead in the CBD, another in a South Lismore unit, the fourth life lost in the town.
Our thoughts and prayers are with the families, and our hearts go out to all of them.
Emergency crews continue to search for victims, door-knocking homes and checking roof cavities. Hello? As the water begins to recede and the massive clean-up gets started.
Just devastating. We to see all the roofs and everything down, it sort of just hits home.
Further south, the farming township of Woodburn remains inundated. How many people are stranded in their homes still isn't clear. The weather system that caused havoc is now moving towards Sydney and the state's south coast, told to brace for a rain bomb tonight.
As these floods move through from the north to the south, that we follow those instructions, those evacuation warnings, if they're in place, please prepare, please get ready to leave.
In southeast Queensland, they're mopping up.
Reports are that the flood experience in Logan was at least as bad as has been experienced since 1974.
In some areas, the worst flood event in 100 years. This quad bike snagged on a power line in Gympie shows just how high the water rose. 2,000 businesses and homes in the town were impacted. Queensland Police is redeploying officers to evacuated flood zones to stamp out looting.
That is an additional 124 staff across the entire southeast.
The Prime Minister vowing to send in additional troops. Army crews have already saved more than 70 people trapped by the floods. The threat isn't over for the region, with more wild weather forecast this week.
Severe thunderstorms with large hail, damaging winds and locally heavy rainfall become likely around the southeast Queensland from today.
In Brisbane, 15,000 homes are cleaning up. More than 8,000 people have already signed up to join the Mud Army, volunteering their time, muscle and food. It's as thousands remain without power and supermarket shelves sit empty. With supply chains cut and warehouses inundated, the disaster far from over. Emma O'Sullivan, 7 News.
As we go to air tonight, there are reports Russian paratroopers have landed in Ukraine's second largest city of Kharkiv in the hopes of taking the besieged city. But Moscow also has Kiev in its sights, with landmarks attacked and a giant Russian military convoy now less than 30 kilometres from the capital.
In the Ukrainian capital, a missile strike, followed by another missile strike, and another missile strike. 3 surgical hits on a city in need of first aid. We'd been shooting a report nearby when one flew straight over us. The blast, enormous, 5 killed. We visited the site as it was still burning.
It looks like the target was this TV tower. You can still see smoke rising from the base here. It's difficult to tell from here just how much damage was inflicted, but if they wanted to bring it down, they failed.
But it did knock out transmission from multiple television stations, an attempt, say Ukrainian officials, to cut off the country from communications so Russia can control the narrative of this war. A war being fiercely fought from the air and on the ground. A tank firing directly at buildings near Kiev with people inside. All that remains now, rubble. Moscow had warned Ukrainian civilians to leave big cities. This was one reason why. Kharkiv's Freedom Square late yesterday when freedom clearly came under attack. At least 10 killed and a government building decimated. This car was driving past as the missiles hit. Survival or death, just a matter of chance.
Ukraine every day. You should stop it. Immediately stop it.
But that is unlikely, it seems. Russia's assault on Ukraine is intensifying. It is brutal and deadly. And despite claims it's only going after military targets like this one in the northwest, these scenes in Kharkiv suggest otherwise. Hospitals, schools, residential buildings, all targeted. Why us? We're regular folks, this woman says. The country's president accusing Moscow of state terrorism for its bombardment of Kharkiv. But despite the bloodshed, Russians have underestimated the strength of Ukraine's resistance. This video has emerged from the first day of fighting. Local troops armed with donated Stinger missiles bring down a Russian helicopter.
Yes! Yes! Here in Kiev, more blackened evidence of another fierce firefight between locals and Russians. These are tank shells scattered by the dozen down this footpath, and over here, heavy vehicle, Russian, blackened and burned. It's scenes like these that leave Ukrainians rejoicing at the success of their military and volunteers. But the threat approaching from the north right now is far more serious.
Satellites watching the slow, terrifying progress of a 64-kilometre convoy of Russian tanks headed straight for the capital. Some in the city weren't waiting for their arrival, scrambling for trains headed out that were too full to take them all. Then, in the middle of this panicked boarding, air raid sirens, as if they needed a reminder of why they were going.
Awful feeling.
Yeah.
Yes. But we don't have a place.
You couldn't get on the train?
No.
It's mostly women and children, the dads and partners staying to help defend the city.
Afraid, very afraid.
Where are you going to go to? Do you know where you're going?
I don't know.
There's a real sense of fear and foreboding here in Kiev in the knowledge that the Russian war machine is approaching. So many just want to get out, but there are only so many trains and too few seats.
But those who choose to stay are galvanised by Russia's aggression.
We won't give up on Ukraine. Putin is an idiot. I would rather die from starvation than be their slave.
A makeshift production line has been set up in one city basement as women sew camouflage nets for their troops. It's our duty. They die there for us, says this woman, while men line the streets to buy guns.
Russians kill little children, 5-6 years old, and we don't want it. We have to fight against it.
Ordinary Ukrainians willing to risk their lives to slow the invasion of their country. Even if it's a fight, they may be unable to win. Chris Reason, 7 News.
Tempers have started to flare over supply shortages in Ukraine as fears turn to the country's future generation. Dozens of children have already been killed, and experts warn those who survive will suffer for the rest of their lives.
A week since the end of the world as they knew it. The late call-up they're all waiting for, a spot on the train out of Lviv. But a ride to freedom is not guaranteed. The train fills well before the platform is empty.
Are you frightened not being able to leave?
Sure.
Of course.
This couple is trying to reach family in Poland. If they can't, they're on the streets.
No place for us.
Supplies and morale are low and getting lower.
There's one thing there's no shortage of here, and that's frayed tempers. People are tired, they're cranky, and they just want to get away, and that leads to conflict.
And that leads to trauma.
Endless thing you're seeing here of kids farewelling parents and dads trying to explain to their little daughters why they're leaving and so on. That trauma gets embedded pretty quickly, as does when kids suddenly learn that, you know, life now is about, I hear an air raid siren, I jump out of bed, I go to a bunker.
Because kids are dying here. Ukraine's president says 17 were killed in conflict just last night. More lives at risk in the basement of Kyiv's main maternity hospital. Under the rusty pipes, mothers cling to their sick kids who need continuous care. While along the rusty rail, mothers try to comfort their healthy kids as they head into an uncertain future. Jeff Parry in Ukraine, 7 News.
Ukraine is now in the 7th day of this war. Russian troops are now circling the capital, Kiev, and they're muscling in on the cities in the country's south. Here's Mike Amor with the latest.
Ukrainians have now endured this